The Republicans didn't get the ICE funding they wanted, and the Democrats didn't get the ICE restrictions they wanted. This is why you didn't hear much about it in the press, because there were no winners, no media opportunities for Congress people to declare victory. It was just 76 days of pain to everyday federal employees who just wanted to do their job. Hello again. Welcome to The Ruthless Truth. I am your host, Truth Davis. In this forum, I share opinions, thoughts, truths on a wide variety of topics based on what I believe to be a unique life experience. And you can read all the details in the notes or the bio. My intent is to share stories, experiences, and hopefully provide some life and career lessons that will aid you in your life journey. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5, subscribe to the YouTube channel Ruthless Truth, and there's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. General format, I'll share some commentary on current news items or just some thoughts. Then I'll have a deeper discussion on one topic, which will be today's truth. And then I like to finish with an American history fun fact. Okay, so much to get to. Let's start with some positive news. After 76 days, the partial government shutdown ended on May 1st when the president signed a funding bill after the House finally approved the Senate bill that passed unanimously weeks ago. So, after all the travel disruption, the resignation of over 1,000 TSA officers, and constant infighting in Congress, what did the shutdown accomplish? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There were no policy changes. There was no new legislation. The Republicans didn't get the ICE funding they wanted, and the Democrats didn't get the ICE restrictions they wanted. This is why you didn't hear much about it in the press, because there were no winners, no media opportunities for Congress people to declare victory. It was just 76 days of pain to everyday federal employees who just wanted to do their jobs. Again, November can't get here fast enough. The other big news item was the shutdown of Spirit Airlines. After 34 years, the low-cost airline ceased operations on May 1st. And the shutdown was immediate, as following the announcement, Spirit Airline ticket counters were unstaffed and the call center was shut down. 60,000 open customer tickets were affected and 17,000 employees were put out of work. And a little known fact about Spirit, it was the safest airline in the U.S., having never experienced a single passenger death throughout its operating history. So what happened? Well, Spirit has been in financial difficulty for the past few years. They face increased competition from non-major airlines such as Frontier and JetBlue. And then the major airlines introduced basic economy fares to also increase the competitive environment. And it is often the case, whenever anything goes wrong in this country, the current White House likes to blame the Biden administration. Well, in the case of Spirit Airlines, both administrations were somewhat culpable. Okay, first the Biden piece of the story. In July 2022, Spirit agreed to an offer to be purchased by JetBlue for $3.8 billion. The merger would have created the fifth largest U.S. airlines and represent a stronger competitor against the big four airlines of Delta, United, American, and Southwest. However, Biden administration Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, Jonathan Cantor, sued to block the merger, and in March 2024 prevailed as a federal judge ruled that the merger did indeed violate antitrust laws by eliminating a low-cost competitor. By the way, Cantor claims no responsibility for the demise of Spirit, asserting it was all because of poor managed decisions. I mean, come on. I mean, what'd you expect him to say? Now to the Trump side of this. Since the start of the war of choice versus Iran, the cost of jet fuel has increased from $2.50 per gallon on February 28th to $4.50 per gallon as of May 1st. That's an increase of 82%. Now, to be clear, Spirit Airlines was already struggling before the war with Iran. They had some of the lowest customer satisfaction scores and some of the highest complaints in the industry. And Spirit has not been profitable since the pandemic. But the increase in jet fuel basically just pushed them over the edge to a point they could no longer continue operations. So, what does the demise of Spirit Airlines mean to all of us? Your initial thought may be, well, I never traveled on Spirit, so I'm unaffected. Oh no, that's not how capitalism and the free market works. While you may have never flown Spirit, I know I haven't, we're all affected by the elimination of an airline competitor, especially a low-cost one, because Spirit put pressure on the other carriers who serve the same markets as Spirit. Just the presence of Spirit kept them honest on price increases. Well, that pressure is gone, or at least reduced. Look, airline prices were going to increase anyway because of the jet fuel prices, but the loss of Spirit is an additional reason we all will pay more to fly for the coming months. Okay, final news item. On April 29th, a Supreme Court ruling significantly narrowed a key provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Specifically, it struck down Section 2, which outlawed discrimination in voting on the basis of race. This provision allowed and sometimes demanded the use of race-conscious data in redistricting to protect the voting power of minorities. Justice Samuel Alito stated that from now on, anyone who wished to challenge a map on such grounds must show proof that the map makers had, quote, intentionally drawn legislative districts to disadvantage a given racial group. Okay, so, what is the significance of this ruling? Well, it now allows states to redraw congressional district maps without any regard to protecting the representation or rights of minority groups. And some states didn't wait long to take action. The very next day after the ruling, my home state of Tennessee called a special session to redraw maps. Tennessee is one of the reddest states in the country. Of the 95 counties in the state of Tennessee, only Shelby County, which includes the city of Memphis, is majority black, and it's also the only Democrat congressional district. Well, Tennessee legislators are proceeding to split up this congressional district, eliminating any minority districts, almost guaranteeing that Tennessee will be completely red with no Democrats in Congress. Expect to see more of this in other red states as we approach the midterms in November. Now, I can't call it rigging because these actions are legal via the Supreme Court ruling. But the GOP badly needs unfair advantages if they have any hope of avoiding a bloodbath in November. As I've said many times, once an individual or group attains power, they will do whatever is necessary to retain it, unless they face resistance. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Okay, let's get to today's truth. Today's truth addresses a topic that I have struggled to frame because there are so many factors in play. I know I wanted to discuss the current state of relations between black men versus black women. And I hate that I said versus because this suggests an adversarial relationship, and I don't ever want to think that black men and black women are at odds with each other. But I already had 2 data points to consider, and recently I saw a third. So, in science and finance, 3 data points constitute a trend. I also realized that before I can discuss the state of black men and black women relations, I had to start with black men first. Then once we have a clear understanding of black men, independent of women, then we can proceed to discuss how black men and women interact together. So today's truth is part one of a two-part discussion. Today's truth is looking at black men and how they view themselves and their masculinity. Okay, so what led me to even consider this was a topic worth discussing? Well, I already had two data points. Point one, the surprising number of black men who feel a connection to and have avid support for Donald Trump. Point two, the fact that more black men voted for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton than voted for Kamala Harris. And then the most recent data point, the diametrically opposing reactions of black men versus black women to the breakup of Meg Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson. Okay, clearly black men and black women see the world differently. Now, when it comes to black men and their masculinity, we first need to review and acknowledge the historical perspective. Slavery in the United States was a system that aimed to emasculate the black male, robbing them of their roles as providers, protectors, and heads of household through a combination of severe physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. And then even once slavery ended, it was difficult for men to establish the role of head of household and provider because there were far more employment opportunities available to black women than to black men. I mean, black women could work as maids, cooks, nurses, seamstresses, childcare providers. Conversely, there were no domestic or household employment options for black men. And additionally, industrial jobs within the North and the South were largely closed to black men due to discrimination and union exclusion, leaving them with only the most unskilled, dangerous positions or sharecropping. Fast forward to today. Regardless of race, most men want to be seen as masculine or manly. But given the historical treatment of black men, most social scientists agree that this need is even more prevalent and more important for black men because for decades, it was harder to achieve. Okay? Specifically, labor market discrimination against black men resulted in lower wages and less stable employment compared to white men. Consequently, married black women have a long history of being financial contributors, even co-breadwinners, to two-parent households because of black men's precarious labor market position. And when it comes to relationships with women, a key testament of manliness is that women need us. They need us to be leaders, providers, protectors, to father children, and to head the household. And the woman's role? To be supportive, available, obedient, and submissive. The women are partners, just not equal partners. But that's a harder position for men to hold, given how often and how much black women contribute to the household income. So if they can't be the absolute boss and head of the household at all times, some of these men lose their way or even get angry or very angry if they don't feel they're being given the proper respect. And by respect, I mean total authority over a wife and children, which is an important thing to some men. And because of these historical labor dynamics, women are in a position now where they can want a man, but they don't need one to survive. They're able to support themselves, have children or live as they please. This means women can be very choosy or even resistant. And some men just don't like this. As a result, some men accuse black women, especially the, quote, strong, independent woman, of assuming masculine traits, such as being confrontational, dominant, and not needing help. They felt the emergence of Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee as evidence of the feminization of the party, and that Trump's bravado and rampant sexism, no matter how toxic, is at least a form of masculinity. I mean, he's a boss. So while men shouldn't need to define their masculinity relative to women, it's hard to resist or ignore. I mean, a very common expression among black men is to keep your girlfriend or keep your girl in check. This means she doesn't disagree, she doesn't argue, she doesn't act independently, but instead quietly and nicely falls in line and accepts and follows the man's direction. Okay? So when you kind of summarize it, how do men in general, and black men in particular, define masculinity? Well, here's the dictionary baseline definition that applies to all men. It is a set of traits, behaviors, and roles that society assigns, quote, for men. You know the stereotypes. Be tough, dominate, stay in control, handle your business solo, and maybe, hey, build up those pecs and biceps while you're at it. And when you look just at black men, these traits just get stronger. A 2022 study found that young black males were, quote, more likely than white male youths to feel greater pressure to be physically and emotionally strong, play sports, and to dominate or control others. So if these are the traits of masculinity, then what do these men see as feminine traits? Well, they want their women to be soft, supportive, peaceful, needy, vulnerable, pious, and most of all, submissive. But is this what black women aspire to be? Okay? There was a time, I think, where many did, but the difference in point of view is a key factor and potential issue when it comes to black male and female interaction. Now, we'll explore that further in part 2 of this discussion in next week's episode of The Ruthless Truth. Be sure to tune in. Okay, let's get to today's American history fun fact. Today's American history fun fact. Typically in the American history fun fact, I tell stories or events or people that are unknown to the majority of the listeners. I very frequently receive comments confirming this, with people telling me, I never heard of her, or I never knew about this, or we were never taught this in school. Okay? Today's a little different, because I'm quite certain almost all of you have heard of this organization, and I'm equally certain that most of you don't know the true story, and this is one of the most misunderstood and unfairly depicted organizations in U.S. history. In today's American History Fun Fact, I will tell the true story of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party was founded in Oakland, California by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Newton was born in Monroe, Louisiana in 1949, but his family later relocated to Oakland to escape the violence and oppression of the Jim Crow South. Although he graduated from high school in 1959, Huey Newton was functionally illiterate, but he was later taught to read by his brother, eventually earning a bachelor's degree from UC Santa Cruz and later a PhD from the same institution. Bobby Seale was born in Dallas, Texas in 1936, and similar to Newton, his family was impoverished and also migrated to California, settling in Berkeley. Now, Bobby dropped out of high school in 1955 and joined the U.S. Navy. Bobby Seale was court-martialed for fighting and, after working as a laborer, earned his high school diploma and attended Merritt Community College, studying engineering and politics. While at college, Bobby Seale joined the Afro-American Association, a group on the campus devoted to self-education about African and African-American history, along with conversations about philosophy, religion, economics, and politics, including aspects of black separatism. This is where he met Huey P. Newton. Now, Newton and Seale were disappointed in the failure of the civil rights movement to improve the condition of blacks outside the South. They saw brutality against civil rights protesters as part of a long tradition of police violence and state oppression. They immersed themselves in the history of blacks in America. And in 1966, they organized young, poor, disenfranchised African Americans into the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The organization was launched as and focused on community support. Local chapters of the Panthers, often led by women, focused attention on community survival programs. They organized a free breakfast program for 20,000 children each day, as well as a free food program for families and the elderly. They sponsored schools, legal aid offices, clothing distribution, local transportation, and health clinics and sickle cell testing centers. These activities provided concrete aid to low-income communities and drew support for the Panthers. Now, that said, the initial roots and mission of the organization were to combat police brutality. Northern and Western police departments were almost all white. In 1966, only 16 of Oakland's 661 police officers were black, and that's less than 2.5%. And then after the killing of unarmed Matthew Johnson in San Francisco in September 1966, the Black Panther Party embarked on a new tactic where they would launch, quote, police patrols, where party members would basically just follow and shadow the police to observe and record police behavior. And recognizing California's open carry policy for guns, the Black Panthers openly carried and displayed firearms, including shotguns and assault weapons. Now, this act was done to record incidents of police brutality by distantly following police cars around the neighborhoods. And then when confronted by a police officer, party members cited the laws proving that they'd done nothing wrong, and they threatened to take to court any officer that violated their constitutional rights. Now, to this point, the Black Panther was a small organization with fewer than 100 members and little to no awareness outside of the Bay Area. But all of that changed on May 2nd, 1967. On that day, the California State Assembly Committee on Criminal Procedures was scheduled to convene to discuss what was known as the Mulford Act, which would make the public carrying of loaded firearms illegal. Well, Bobby Seale led a group of 26 armed Panthers into the assembly to protest the bill. Seale and 5 others were arrested on misdemeanor charges. Now, following the assembly protests, later in May 1967, the Black Panther Party first published their 10-point program entitled What We Want, which was a list of demands and outcomes to improve life in black communities. Including in this list was a demand to end police brutality, improve employment, and to have access to decent housing options. Now, with this newfound publicity, the Black Panther Party grew from an Oakland-based organization into an international one with chapters in 48 states in North America, as well as support chapters in countries all around the world. In the late 60s, the Black Panther Party launched more than 35 survival programs and provided community help such as education, tuberculosis testing, legal aid, transportation assistance, ambulance service, and the manufacture and distribution of free shoes to poor people. A particular note was the free breakfast for children program, which began in January 1969, that spread to every major American city with a Black Panther Party chapter. The Black Panther Party quickly expanded to advocate for other social reforms. Among the organizational initiatives, they campaigned for prison reform. They held voter registration drives. They opened free health clinics in a dozen cities, serving thousands who could not afford it. And they created freedom schools in 9 cities, including the noteworthy Oakland Community School, which was led by Erica Huggins from 1973 to 1981. Now, back in 1967, Huey P. Newton was involved in a shootout which led to the death of police officer John Frey and injuries to himself and another police officer. And in 1968, He was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. But in 1970, the conviction was reversed, and after 2 subsequent trials that ended in hung juries, the charges were all dropped. Notwithstanding the social services the Black Panther Party provided, the FBI declared the group a communist organization and an enemy of the U.S. government. J. Edgar Hoover had pledged that 1969 would be the last year of the Black Panther Party, and he devoted the resources of the FBI to that end. In a protracted program against the Black Panther Party, the FBI used agent provocateurs, sabotage, misinformation, and lethal force to bring down the national organization. The FBI's campaign culminated in December 1969 with a 5-hour police shootout at the Southern California headquarters of the Black Panther Party and an Illinois state police raid in which Chicago Black Panther leader Fred Hampton was killed. The measures employed by the FBI were so extreme that years later, when they were finally revealed, the then director of the agency publicly apologized for, quote, wrongful uses of power. By 1972, the party's activities and national presence had greatly subsided, and by 1982, the party had dissolved. So what is the legacy of the Black Panther Party? Well, over time, history has been somewhat kinder and recognized the positive social and community origins of the party. Women made up about half of the Panther membership and often held leadership roles. Now, there's no denying that some Panther activities included violence and even deaths, but oftentimes these were acts of retaliation. Still, the Black Panther Party influence persists through community organizing models, social justice movements like Black Lives Matter, and a reevaluation of their role in combating systemic inequality. Okay, that's all I have for you today on The Ruthless Truth. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please follow me on Instagram at TruthDavis5. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Ruthless Truth. There's also a Facebook page, Ruthless Truth. And again, I invite you to review and listen to previous episodes that cover a wide range of topics. I'm sure you'll find something appealing. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to all of you soon.